Hi there, my name is Kendrick, and today I get to have Lindsay back. So, Lindsay, welcome back.
Hi guys.
So, Lindsay, it's been 4 years since our initial
I can't believe it.
interview, and can you let everyone know what your full type is?
Yeah, so INTJ in the ops code, it's FMNITE, blast, play, sleep, consume.
All right, cool. And then you also got your social type back from Dave. What was it again?
Number 3.
All right, sweet. All right, so I want to start first with your journey with your SF consume last, and I do believe it's double feminine also, so it
Oh,
makes it
it
even
is.
harder. And when we had a panel interview, I think it was like several months ago, earlier this year, you were saying how you
Mhm.
screwed up like a handshake with a coworker or something, like you just couldn't get it down. So let's start with that before we talk about the journey with the SF consume last.
Oh gosh, it's funny that when you brought that up, I was like, oh man, I did mention that, didn't I? Because you know, just like a few weeks ago, I was playing poker, and as I was leaving, someone went to go give me a high five, and like for some reason I didn't use my hand that was closest to them. I had used my other hand to reach across in front of myself, and then by somehow doing that, I ended up like tripping over my own feet. So it was probably like the most awkward high five attempt that like I'd seen in a while. So I don't think I've improved too much in that area. However, I did realize that the versus if someone goes for the fist bump versus the handshake versus that, those confuse me a lot. If someone does this, I get it every time, because I think there's like you kind of know it's going to stay that way versus like I don't know, I get confused with the other ones. But again, feminine sensory, it's very movable, so like it's movable in a lot of ways. So the more solid I know the handshake fist bump thing is going to be, the better for me. So work in progress is my
Gotcha.
update.
That's so funny. I'm also lead SF and I can't get those handshakes down, by the way. So I'm in the same boat as you. Like, I remember I had a coworker before. Me and my sisters used to work in the same restaurant when I was younger. And I remember one coworker went up to my sisters, like, your brother doesn't know how to do the bro handshake. And I was like, oh God, because I'm also SF
That's
last.
so funny.
So and even today I don't get it. I'm like, people want to do that thing and they move their hands around and I'm like, which one is it? Like, there's many styles, right? So anyways, but
Yeah. Now I think, I've gotten more comfortable with the fact that like I'm just not very good at it. And so now I kind of, if I totally screw it up, I just lean in. So like if I go for like the high five, but it wasn't supposed to be that, and then I just like I'll go in for the hand hug and I'll hold it. I'll just be like, this is gonna be terrible, but I'm gonna lean into like how bad it is and enjoy it and make it funnier. So that's kind of my coping mechanism.
that's so funny. Um, regarding besides the butchered handshake, what has your journey been like with that SF consume since knowing your type from 4 years ago, or even 5 years since you were in this space even longer than that?
So, I think that it's definitely come a long way, because I think in the beginning, can you hear my dog in the background making noises, playing with this toy? You
Just
heard
a
that?
little bit. It's not enough to be disturbed, like to be
Okay, cool.
distraction.
Okay, cool. Sensory chaos. So, in the very beginning, I think I saw like I think I realized how big of a void the last animal was, like the SF double feminine consume last. And I was like, okay, this is definitely a thing. And I realized also pretty early on, like if I could share anything, like if I could pick up someone off the side of the road and tell them one thing about their personality type, it'd be their last animal. Like if I could tell everyone one thing. Because I think that kind of points to a lot of like the just over time, that's where you end up stumbling the most. And I think in the beginning, I thought of it as like, okay, I have to like work on this thing, like I have to like make a task out of like working on consume last. But what I realized, I think over time, was it wasn't so much about like working on something in a way that was like, I wasn't trying to make it more. I think when we try to work on changing things or improving things, like we automatically like assume that it's going to be like this painful, grueling process. Like I'm going to go run 5 miles right now, and it's just going to be like tough and suck. Whereas like I didn't really see the fact that, you know, when we're trying to incorporate either like our lower functions or our last animal, like if we look at it in a way that's like, how do I incorporate this a little bit in my life that I'm already living in a way that makes it more beneficial, like makes my life truly better in a way? That's where I'm kind of at now. And I think it's like refined and calmed my approach in a lot of ways. And it feels so much more like at peace, but it also just feels like so much richer in like terms of like the SF richness. And like that's where I want to lead into. So now instead of it being like something I have to work on, it's like I have the privilege of getting to enjoy this other part of myself that makes my life better. So that's kind of the evolution to where I am today.
That's awesome. So from your camp, deliberately working in it like to the point where you overwhelm yourself is not good, but definitely working in it is a good thing. There's definitely different aspects of it. I think you got the SF part down, except for like the handshake stuff. But like, um, what about the consuming information for self part? Like how are you in that aspect where like, because you have savior play, so you can gather information from the tribe quite easily, which you might abuse, kind of like what a lot of consume
Sometimes
last
I do,
part.
yes.
Yeah. But what about the consume last part where like you are actually doing the research yourself for yourself, not, and it's SF, like that specific flavor also, which is the SF flavor.
Yeah, I think like in terms of consuming the actual information, I really relish the times where I just kind of tell myself I'm not doing anything right now. And those are the times where I'm able to kind of deep dive. I'm like, I'm not doing anything right now. And then all of a sudden I start thinking about some thought I haven't thought about in a while. And then that reminds me of, oh yeah, I haven't actually figured out this thing. And I'm like, maybe let me look that up. And like, then I'll start, it's usually I end up down some like NT like research hole, but it's for an SF consume purpose because I'm not using this information for the tribe. I'm not using it like, sure, it's nerdy as heck, but I'm actually just like enjoying my time reading and consuming. And sure, I am puzzling. Like I'm not denying that there's not NT happening because that's kind of what's driving it in a way. It's like I have my saviors on board, but like I truly enjoy, like I love reading just like pieces of science, like published articles that are in alignment with what I'm trying to mentally solve. It's not about something in particular, but it's a little bits and pieces that help me get a more comprehensive understanding of some subject that I'm somewhere NT puzzling. And again, it's not for any significant purpose. I'm not trying to like do anything with that information. It's not going to the tribe. I just get to keep it to myself, but it doesn't really happen unless I say I'm not doing anything
Right.
and have that time to not do anything when I actually end up truly consuming, because it's almost like, okay, well, I guess it's probably just a permission game that I'm mentally playing with myself to say, well, now I'm allowed to actually consume, so.
I'm also wondering that kind of like with the animal stack, it's easier to get to the last animal stack if you've already kind of gone through the gauntlet. Like for you, it's blast, play, sleep,
Yeah.
right? Just to add another layer to that, the one thing that we both have something similar is we're both like crackhead on the front end and like mope on the back end. A little bit different because I'm play blast and then consume sleep, while you're blast play and then sleep consume. But similar effect where crackhead first and then you're gonna have a swing when you become a mope. So can you share a little bit on what that looks like when you go from crackhead mode to mope mode, and then from mope mode again going from sleep to consume? The easy transition to that, at the end.
Yeah, I would say like definitely in terms of the sequence of a day, my first, like my beginning of the day is really way more of I do the stuff that I know I need to do pattern wise for like my own like longevity and health and stuff like that. Like I'll go to the gym every morning, like whether I like it or not. And I'll, kind of do things that I have to do in the morning. Otherwise it will just never happen. Like I realized pretty early in life, if I save going to the gym till the end of the day, I'm too tired by that point, So I have my kind of like NI habits of time and space that I adhere to. But then outside of that, you know, my job does require a lot of like NT blast problem solving, you know, communication aspects. So that blast play piece is like, as much as I wish I could just be in a corner and like shut my door and like no one could come talk to me for like the entire day, the role that, you know, my role does play to my saviors in a lot of ways. And so I have that tribe responsibility that I have to, you know, deal with throughout the day. And then, you know, towards the end of the day, it's like by honestly like 2 o'clock, I'm done, like mentally, in terms of like that kind of energy, that blast play energy. And so usually between like 2 and 6 is like more, almost like more of like my sleep processing. Like I kind of turn off during that period. And then like after, then it's like kind of like consume, what do I do for myself at this point at the end of the day? And so it really does follow the animal track, which I think in my case kind of works to my favor, because like I can do more of my like my work in the morning time, and then I can kind of use that sleep consume time just to like turn off and turn away, and in a lot of ways do what I would want to do anyway. Like I think that's where the sleep is. It's like, do I really want to blast play? Like, not really, you know, like I think blast is kind of like on its own, but like I can't really help but do that. But in terms of the play, it's like I don't really want to play. I don't really want to play energy, like play that game, but the cognitive responsibility drives me to do that as a savior. And what I really want to do is kind of like the sleep like process, like get in my own headspace, that NIFI sleep. And so that's kind of where I feel driven to. And then after that is where I get into the consume land. So
Gotcha. I want to pivot to your social type because you're talking about work right now. Are you still working in the same place that you mentioned like 4 years ago to me? Or
yeah, I'm a director of sales and marketing at like a wellness resort. So that's what I've been doing for many years. And then I have my side projects that still exist in conjunction with that. So but yeah, now I oversee a team of like around like 15 people, and but end up doing a lot more. I don't know, it's a very strange role in terms of I end up doing a lot more stuff with like software than I was like ever expected. And but you know, all the stuff that we learn in life contributes to what we end up doing. So
well, that's the interesting thing because you are a 3, so you're supposed to be a specialist, but then you're doing the role of a 2, which is kind of like more managerial. Um, do you feel any
well so
cognitive dissonance in that, or?
so though I am a manager, I'm like an anti-manager, because the way that I look at things is like everyone's an adult, they should be able to manage themselves. And if they can't manage themselves, they shouldn't be working with me. So I much go to the side of like, you know, I'm, you know, you know of like you hear of like the manager who's like the micromanager and they're like looking over everyone's. I could not be farther from that person, because I don't have time, and nor do I have interest in doing anyone else's job other than what I have to do, because I've already taken on usually like bigger, deeper, longer, more cognitive heavy projects that is very hard for me to turn my attention away from, to just to like look over someone's shoulder. So though I am a manager, it's like I have the system in place that kind of lets everyone know what they need to do, and they just follow the structure, and then everyone's good. So so yes, and I don't think I could do a managerial role that had more like day-to-day kind of feedback, if that makes sense.
Have you ever had anyone deviate from that system that you put in place, and then it's been a problem, and then that you were forced to kind of like, play, I mean, you do have savior play, so you could do it if you needed
Yep.
to, but it's not your preference, which is kind of ironic, being having savior play. It's you have that contradiction in the middle, like the play and
Yeah.
the demon friends thing. But
Um,
anyways, go ahead.
yeah, no, I think that so I don't want to sound like way too NITE when I say this, but usually if someone like deviates from the system that's in place, it usually doesn't work out well for them. And so they generally don't want to do it again. In terms of like, I really, and this is like where the saviors come in handy, is like I really try to reduce down to make the workflows and things like that that really truly give the tribe the most benefit, you know? And so I don't put anything in place without having it really thought through and structured in a way that's like, this is going to be like, you can think of anything you want to, this is going to be the way to do it. And so sure, you can go off and try something else, you know, but you're probably going to end up coming back to like this method of doing it. And that's what happens. So, you know, I think the only thing that's kind of challenging, so like that ends up always working out for itself. The only thing that can be challenging is sometimes when people have like interpersonal conflicts. And like, to me, it's just like, I don't even see how this is a problem, but I know that like, you guys need to like talk it out and like, okay, do I have to be there? Okay. And usually I think they kind of get it at this point that it's like, I'd rather not do that. And usually they can solve it amongst themselves now. Cause I'm like, again, you're adults, like you're hired at an adult job. You're no longer 17. Like, can you guys figure this out and, you know, be mature about it? Especially when you're working in the sales component is commission. So when you're dealing with people's commissions and their money and their livelihood, it can get a little spicy from time to time. But I think for the most part, they've learned to work it out between each other. And they also know that if I have to deal with it, I'm like dragging my feet. So they try to spare me when possible.
I think it's interesting because you have double masculine NT blast. So it's kind of like, yeah, and you're so confident that this is the way to go, that it seems like it works for where you are working. And then the other thing is like, you're almost, I don't know if this is because you're like a double decider or not, but like you almost feel like you're like an anti-IJ, because IJs like traditionally are micromanagers, right? But then maybe that's not actually an IJ. That's more like a decider that's with IJ tendencies, you know? Because like a real double decider, they don't really care what the tribe does, you know, because like, you know, it'll solve itself, kind of like what you described earlier. And then your attitude of like, they're adults, they can figure this out, you know? It's like
Yeah.
so it's kind of like very hands-off, which is kind of very interesting. I'm pretty sure a lot of people love that. Like, you know, you're not on their ass essentially.
Yeah, I can't be.
Yeah.
And I think too, that's a good point, Kendrick, because like, okay, so then it's like, okay, well, if I'm kind of chill there, where am I being controlling?
Yeah.
And I can tell you that it's like, I am very controlling when it comes to setting up structures that then get a result. So for instance, right now I'm setting up like a suite of software that does scheduling and booking for different businesses with under one business umbrella. And it's the business itself is very different than most. So it's a very non-traditional way of having to use the software components. And so as a result of that, I'm really NT puzzling to like figure out the best solutions and how things should come together so that people are doing the least amount of work, getting the most amount of benefit, you know, hopefully like reducing workload for certain people who are doing things manually right now. And so when it comes to that kind of stuff, like that's where I am like the controlling IJ, because I so much like know where I want to take something. And like I see that end goal of like how things should be coming together. And it's almost like I feel it in my body of like how things need to come together, that, you know, that's where I get controlling. That's the side where it's like, okay, the IJ control, like that's where she is like, no, like, oh, someone wants to just like change something like really like off the cuff and like we're just going to do something a different way, like I'll go to battle for whatever, you know, the direction kind of is going, because really I've put so much work to get it to that point and I know where it's going to end up. So I'm cool with the people stuff is easy. For the most part. I'm pretty chill there, but it's kind of that other side, that project oriented, like the strategy behind something is where I can get a little bit less chill.
So controlling with the thing, but not the people, and especially with the NI, like kind of like the North Star or the trajectory, in a plan of action, essentially. So okay, and also because you're number 3, you put a lot of work into your craft. You know, it's not like kind of what Dave and Chan said, where 1s and 2s have a gimmick or like a scam, while 3s and 4s, they what they're building is legit. So in your case, it's not like a band-aid for a solution. It's like a real solution that's been really thought out, and it's as foolproof as you can get, you know.
Yeah, and I think it's like an energy thing for me too, because it's like, if I don't come to like the best solution for something, if I don't really like, I do not have the energy to like do this BS again. Like I don't have the energy to like go through like, okay, well that band-aid fell off. Now let's find another one. Like I cannot, in any category of life, I cannot be bothered. So I rather find the end all solution for at least, and I'm not unreasonable too, like for whatever reasonable period of time it should be a solution for, and then, solve that versus like, there's situations where you need the TE duct tape to go on something and like to move on, but like those are very temporary things. And like, I think I have a good definition between like what should be a temporary fix and what should be a more long-term solution.
Oh, I see. So I guess you use the T thing just as a bridge, but ultimately you have like a well thought out NT plan. That's not
Yeah.
not a band-aid, not a TE band-aid. um,
Yeah. Yeah. But I'm also like very guilty of using the TE band-aid. Like when it comes to like little things like in like just day-to-day activity where I'm like, oh yeah, like not even like you literally could use the duct tape as the option to like fix this thing right now, or like the zip tie, whatever it is.
I think you kind of have to though, because like sometimes with like how when things operate in real time, you don't have time to TI something, um, you know,
I
limit.
don't.
Like TI is good for long term planning in my opinion, but like it's like if you go to get fast food, right? You don't want the TI person to make your fast food because it's they're gonna do it their way, and their way might not be what the customer wants, right? So it's one of those things. But like you don't want a T person building a rocket ship who's gonna put duct tape on the rocket ship that's going to Mars or the moon,
Totally.
and it's like
Yeah, exactly.
you know um. So, anyways, I want to talk about your cognitive dissonance in your social type and your animal stack, and that is kind of like what we mentioned before the interview started, where
Oh yeah, yeah.
you have play as a savior, but you have demon friends, and that's kind of like the weird thing where you are very friendly because you have savior play, but you have demon friends, so it's kind of it makes it a little bit strange in that sense. So can you share a little bit about demon friends but having high play at the same time? Like, do you have a lot of friends or not a lot of friends? Because I've talked to a bunch of number threes, and it's kind of a mixed camp because like demon friends is kind of like could go either way, either like to no friend land or like to actually have friends. So where do you stand in that?
Yeah. So I'm definitely like, and sometimes it's almost like embarrassing. Well, I'll tell you about a situation where it was kind of embarrassing to say, but so I've very like few like real life friends. Like I always have my internet friends, as I'll say, but in terms of like my best friend lives in Colorado, and so I see her like once or twice a year, and like I really don't hang out with anyone like other than that. I don't do like friend stuff, and like I'm open to the fact that maybe that's just where I am in life right now, and that later in life I'll want more of a like real life community. But I definitely don't have like the friend network now. Like as I mentioned earlier, like I will go, like the social activity I will do is go play poker, which is also very like NT and like kind of competitive at the same time. And the place that I'll go and I'll play cards, it's usually like a bunch of Vietnam vets and like middle-aged men that like it's hilarious. And but like you said, like I have the play. So once after a period of about a year where I finally got comfortable in the actual sensory context where I was able to open my mouth and say a few words, then I kind of got to be a little bit more just like I knew people then like who would also go play this game. And one time I was at the table and I had just sat down. I'm like, oh, my friends are here, just as kind of an open blanket statement, because I knew several people who were playing. And then one of the players he's like, these are your real friends? And I'm like, yeah, And then he's like, wait, do you hang out with them outside of poker? And I'm like, no. And he's like, well, then they're not your real friends. And I was like, like the
Oh,
teary-eyed
geez.
emoji. Like I swear that was me in real
Geez.
life, because I was like, oh,
Harsh.
I mean, I thought this was friends enough. Like, isn't this friends? But he was actually right. It's like these are people who I know at this point. And but like they're not actual like friends. Like I don't have anyone's phone number. I don't call anyone up on a weekend, And so yeah, I think I don't, again, it's like doesn't have friends as a savior in terms of the social type. But it's very comfortable also getting information from the tribe, like you had mentioned before. And someone had posted in the OP Facebook group earlier, I think it was today or yesterday, like how do you feel like asking, like if you don't know an answer to something, do you feel comfortable asking a question, to someone if you don't know? And I saw a lot of people being like, it's kind of uncomfortable, or I'll preface it by saying like, I know this is a stupid question, but and I was thinking about it, I was like, oh my gosh, like I'll ask, if I have an actual question about something, I will ask anyone anything. Like I'm not apologetic at all about not knowing the answer, and it's like, if I've gotten to the point where I actually have a question, it's like, it's almost a compliment that I would actually be willing to receive the information from the other person, because it's like, I trust you enough to give me an answer on this, like it seems as though you have the answer and I would like the answer, please. Like, can you please tell me, the information, trying to shortcut the consume. So yeah, that's where I really see my play at work. And I think that question actually helped me process it even more, because I'm like, wow, I'm unapologetic with asking for the information if I want it. But yeah, the you don't have to be friends with a person to do that. So
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you can bother anybody, especially if you have TE, like it's not personal, so who cares,
yeah,
like,
totally.
yeah, especially, I mean, I can even see it more for you, especially the consume last year, like whatever it takes to get the information without me doing the consume, so with that being said though, you do have a one friend in Colorado that you mentioned. So it's not like you don't have any real,
Yeah.
you do have a real friend. It's just small. And like, even with a poker
Yeah.
thing, I would consider it as like poker friends. Like, it's like, it's not like,
Yeah, like I know their names. I know a few people's names.
it's not a deep friendship. It's like it's like where you play this game and then that's it, and then that's okay. And you can have like different groups of people that you can kind of bounce between, and they're not really your true friends in the sense where like they're not gonna come over your house and you guys can hang out and stuff. But
Yeah.
it's like they're friends, like, you can have work friends, for example, right? I'm like, you won't hang out with them outside of work, but they're your friends at work,
Right.
so
Yeah. They're your friendly acquaintances.
yeah, so like shallow friendship, I guess you could say, or something like that. um
Yeah, it's like very surface level, but like at the same time, I don't think that anyone has, and this is again me as a three talking and saying this, I don't know if anyone really has the time and space to really have that many friends with like that deep of a friendship, because I can't imagine like the time allotment that would go into multiple good friends. Because to me, it's like, if I have a friend, it's, I would want to be present, and maybe I'm just overthinking of it too much, but like, to me, the idea of having a lot of good friends is like a lot of upkeep, and it's almost like a lot of responsibility that I'm okay saying like, I can't really do that,
right.
so yeah.
Well, I have Savior friends, and I think you only need to see your friends once a year to maintain a deep friendship. I know that sounds silly,
I
but
like that.
it literally is like once a year. Like, I see a lot of my best friends just like once a year. It's still, it's
That's
ridiculous.
great though.
Yeah, because like the
How
way
many friends do you have?
oh God, way too many. But like, I, I have to count. Let me, if I count, maybe like 8 to 10, maybe like good friends.
Okay,
But
nice.
yeah, like, but in terms of upkeep, like, yeah, usually see them like once a year, like nowadays, because I'm older now. But like when I was younger, I used to see them like all the time, especially another thing I noticed was when I was talking to people with demon friends versus savior friends. Even with the IPs that has savior friends, like I interviewed Nathan, the INTP in the group,
Yeah, yeah.
the Jack INTP.
TISI.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he has friends he's known since they were sharing the same crib, like when they were babies, and they're like friends
Wild.
today because he's a four, right? So, and then
Amazing.
I know I'm like, you're friends with someone to share the same crib with. And then, like for me, I've had friends since I was 10 years old, you know, like 20 plus years of friendship, still to this day, still going strong.
Wow.
And I used to see them a lot when I was in elementary school and high school, but obviously now I see them like once a year. And that's enough. And that's enough. We still maintain that friendship and it's good enough. And I know it's gonna loop back again when I'm older. I don't work as much anymore, a lot less like
Yeah.
responsibility, and it could go back to kind of like elementary and high school days again. That's why I invest in friendship, because I know that's like the finish line, right? Like if you look at like the long-term finish line, I'm like, so what are you gonna do after you do the middle stuff, which is like work essentially?
Right. Yeah.
Well, it's friends
Yeah.
again, right? So that's why I'm investing in friendship, because I know that's the finish line. And like that's why I don't want to be a number one. It's like, what's the point? Like you get to the top and you have nobody. It's kind of sad,
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyways, that's just my perspective on that.
No, that's it's good. And so one more question for you on the friends. How often, like, okay, like seeing the friends once a year, totally get that. How like often throughout the year do you touch base with them, or like, phone call or text message or whatever?
I message my friends at least once a week, just on
Okay. Wow, you're so good.
yeah, it's not something like, oh hey, how are you doing? It's like like if I want to talk shit about something, I'll message them about it, or something like
Gotcha.
that,
Yeah.
right? Or like recently it's Black Friday. I'm like, hey, what are you gonna get? That kind of
Nice. Yeah.
yeah, so that kind of deal. Or it depends. Like I have friends who are like, I'm a number two. I know David Shannon wasn't sure if I was a two and a four. Um,
Mhm.
I think the four was apparent because I'm super friendly and stuff, but like, and I also have this YouTube channel that I've been running for like so long, and people kind of see it as specialized.
Yeah.
But it's like if you look at my animal stack, it looks like it's play blast, because I'm play blast consume sleep. Well, um, play is friends, and blast is specialization, and consume is responsibility, and one is flex, right? So if you look at it, I would be a straight flush number four, but I have cognitive dissonance because I actually don't relate to it, because I strongly feel like I'm a number two. Because if I look at my life pile, it is true I've worked in the fitness industry for 10 years, but within the fitness industry, I am doing personal training, I'm teaching circuit training, I'm teaching seniors class, I'm teaching a class for people with osteoporosis, I teach a spin class. I also now I got my yoga certification. So I'm doing a bunch of different stuff within that area. And on top of that, at the same time that I'm doing that, right, I was also working as a paid travel blogger. I have a travel YouTube channel. I have personality trainer YouTube channel. And then on top of that, I also work in the Canadian federal election as a supervisor. And on top
Oh
of that,
my
I also work
gosh.
as a recruiter, before for a security company, most recently for a travel nurse company. So I'm wearing all these different hats for different companies that has absolutely nothing in common. And I have that obsession with work that the typical two has, where during the day I have my day job, at night I'm working on my YouTube channel, and it's kind of the process. And I'm just obsessed with work. I can't stop working. Kind of like the two description is working for the sake of work. Is
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm doing all that. So if I look at my life pile, I'm like, no, I'm not a four. So I have gimmick
Yeah,
too.
definitely not.
Yeah, and I have the scam gimmick thing that David Chan is talking about, where like, you know, threes and fours, they're the craftsmen. Like you really want to hone in your crafts, and that speaks for itself. And you don't have to sell it, because the quality is so good that it sells itself essentially. While for me, I remember when I had my YouTube travel YouTube channel I was building before, and my travel blog, the first thing that came to my mind is like, how am I going to make a sales funnel and have like an online course to sell at the end of it? And and what is the sales pitch going to be like? So I was already thinking of the gimmick instead of focusing on
Right.
the craft. Now nowadays, obviously with
Yeah.
my personality YouTube channel, I'm thinking more like a three now. I'm like, okay, I gotta do what those guys are doing, because they're doing it right. So I'm really gonna focus on the interviews. I'm gonna work on my explainer videos and make it as SF as possible. So I really want to do what the threes are doing, not the BS thing that ones and twos are doing with the gimmick mindset, which I think that it doesn't like ultimately it's not serving anyone, like to focus on the gimmick than
Yeah.
craft. So that's
Yeah. No, you're right. And like it's funny too, is like, I see like the INTJs in particular as like kind of like have a gimmick like in their nature also, but it's from a different perspective. And like if I think about it applying to myself, it's like I'm like a really good person to like teach you how to have a scam. but like I'm not doing it myself, like I'm not actually applying it to like my personal funnel, because like my personal funnel is like, it's more about like my brand, like my message. Like I really see it as like the long-term value of any followership that I get. And like I know like if you create like good relationships with subscribers or whoever, it's like those people they'll follow you for many many years. So like I have no urgency to like do anything with that. But at the same time, it's like the NT like solving like the psychology part of, and that is why it's like, I work as a director of sales and marketing. It's like I'll teach people all day how to like position stuff in a way that's compelling, but I don't really use the compellingness myself, so like I see that too as like, because I remember when David Chen brought that up, I was like, how do I like resolve that in terms of like how I see these things? And I'm like, that's what it is. It's like, it's one thing to be able to do something, but then it's like, are you applying that personally or not?
So you're aware, but you don't participate. And
Yeah, I guess so.
yeah, and then also I think like Dave always makes fun of those guys who are like so scammy, like the INTJ scammers, like not scammers, but like scammy in the way they present their
position things. Yeah.
yeah,
It's a
and
little
it's like
cringy for sure.
yeah, no, and there's like a whole bunch of them. I remember I went to what do you call it? I went to Vid Summit. Have you ever heard of Vid Summit?
I think so.
It's like, where all the YouTubers go to watch like YouTubers that's already successful kind of teach you how to do YouTube and stuff. And like I went there. It's partially owned by Mr. Beast now. Like he's like a partial owner.
Okay.
So I went there and stuff. And then I noticed I was watching like the INTJs who are presenting versus like the EPs presenting. And then like the first thing that I noticed, I was like, why are all the top level YouTubers they're all EPs? There's like maybe like one IJ. And I was like, what are these IJs doing wrong? Why are they not like they obviously they are successful because they're still speaking there, but they're not reaching like like those crazy level like Mr. Beast or Logan Paul or all those guys who are like over 10 plus million subscribers. And I'm like, what are they doing wrong? And then I remember I was watching this one guy that they have in their docs for OPS docs in terms of like personality. He's like an INTJ, looks like Raja, and like super blaster. And I was watching his YouTube channel, and he has good advice, but it's also a little bit cringy too at the same time because it's a little bit too blasty. I remember I saw him at the event, and I was like, and I remember him talking about like his result after the event because I was in the same elevator as him, and then he's like, I forgot his name honestly because I'm a double-sider. I don't remember people's names, but he's like, well, I sold some books after my speech, and I was like, how much money can you make selling books,
Yeah.
Like,
aren't books free mostly now?
Yeah, and then the guy who's running the Vid Summit, I think he's also an INTJ. I think he's sleep, blast, play, consume, double masculine. And then it was just gimmick after gimmick. I'm like, dude, you look so bad on stage right now. You look terrible. Like you have put nothing on your SF. Like who's gonna buy your shit? Like that's what I was thinking, right?
Totally.
And like and I'm like, why don't you copy what these other EPs are doing? Like a lot of them are ESFPs actually. When I was there, it was like mostly ESFP.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, the ESFPs, they have the cool factor. And it's kind of like back to the, kind of like earlier when we are talking about like the craftsmen or like the number threes. Your work is so good that it sells itself, right? So the ESFPs, they're so cool that the subscribers come to them automatically. They don't need to do the, like, subscribe, all the BS, like the, like Dave hates that stuff because he was telling me like, don't be, I think when I was new at the YouTube stuff, I was like, don't do what those INTJs are doing, telling people to subscribe at the start of the YouTube channel. That's, like he said, that's cringe, he said, do it right. If you're going to do it at the end of the video or something like, but anyways, that's just like my observation with
no, it's good. And like, I think there's like a difference too. Like, I think the other side of it is like you're saying, like with you can have the IJs that are super cringy and like they're totally missing the mark on like the SF vibe kind of like cool perspective, and like, those are going to be like the ones who are pushing the scam. Like you're going to see a lot of those like in like the ones and twos, right? Like doing that. But someone had a really interesting observation about me recently, and like now I see what at first I was like, what are you talking about? But like now I understand what they're saying is like the IJ nature is like again, you're kind of like, especially like the NIIJs, we're kind of like compelled to some like end point, you know, whether we realize it or not. And what he said to me, he's like, I was just talking about something that like I was passionate about. Like I think it was like water filtration, honestly. And like I was just like talking about this subject and like how important it was. And he's like, why are you always trying to sell me on something? I'm like, I'm not trying to sell you on anything. Like, I don't have a link. Like, there's nothing I'm trying to like sell. He's like, no. He's like, whenever you're talking, you're like always trying to sell someone on the idea of something. And I was like, oh, you know, like, and like that hit me so hard, and it took me like a while to like sit on that and process. But it's like I might not be selling a thing, like a widget, like a scam, you know, like that's
Right.
like kind of like a behavioral aspect of more like the one it's in twos. But like the INTJs, especially the INTJs, it's like they're selling you on some kind of idea that they want you to buy into,
Right.
you know, and sometimes it does have a tangible product and sometimes it doesn't. But when it was kind of positioned to me that way, I was like, yeah, I guess I do kind of like talk that way. And so again, it falls into the functions, it falls into the whole math of everything. But it was just a really interesting perspective that like caused me to look through another lens at like how I communicate, you know?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of INTJs do what you kind of just mentioned. And I see it a lot
Mm-hmm.
also, not just with the lead blasters like yourself, but also the sleep blast individuals where
Yeah,
there's
same thing. I see them do it too.
yeah, they're selling the NF philosophy of something, kind of like Dave
Mm-hmm.
is always selling growth mindset and selling hero's journey. Like he's
Yeah.
selling that to
Yeah.
people, right? So um
Uh-huh.
so definitely like because I have a
Ah,
client.
good pickup, Kendrick. Yeah.
What's that? Oh yeah, yeah.
No, so that was like a good pickup. Like, yeah, Dave and yep, totally. I see it.
Yeah. And then I have a client at work because I work as I don't have many clients anymore because I kind of was doing the recruiter stuff for a while, but I remember I kept this one client on purpose because I really liked him. He's like an INTJ. I get along with INTJs a lot. Like my girlfriend's an INTJ. So like
Mm-hmm.
so he's like a sleep, consume, blast play, info dominant, double feminine INTJ. And he's always
Mm-hmm.
selling me on his NF philosophy because he's double masculine NF, NIFI.
Uh-huh.
Like when we're having discussions about wars or certain quotes, like recently I brought up this saying, so I'm gonna use the word men, but men is actually people. Okay. So there's a
Gotcha.
saying, it's like I was saying, okay, today's society, or not society, but economical situation is bad because um, hard times creates strong men creates good times, good times creates weak men, and weak men creates hard times.
Mm-hmm.
And you could say men is people, but like that's the original quote because
Right.
then people just said men. But anyways, it's covering my ass here for people who are like that. So I told him this thing and he said that's bullshit, right? And then like he
Mm-hmm.
gets a PhD in psychology, so he's always flexing that on me. And then like
Yeah.
and pretty much he said like there's always gonna be good and bad time, and like how can hard times create strong men when hard times is just gonna crush the people who are gonna be weak regardless of what the situation is, and the strong is gonna be
Yeah.
regardless of what the situation is. They're gonna be strong no matter what. And I didn't know what to
True.
say to him until I went home, and I was like, oh man, I wish I could say this to him now. But like I was thinking, I was like, there's people in the middle, and those people in the middle, they can go either way depending on who's influencing
Mm-hmm.
them and depends on the circumstance. So I feel
Yeah.
like him kind of saying that, because he's so set in that philosophy because it's NF, it's double masculine.
Yeah.
I was like, no, what about the people in the middle? Like the people in the middle, they can be swayed to become stronger if they're
Swayed.
against the wall, or they can be swayed. And especially like you and myself and Dave, we're all like influencers essentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
On YouTube. So when you make an opinion about your water, those people in the middle is
Mm-hmm.
gonna get swayed towards camp water, right? You know, um,
Yeah.
and in Dave's case, it's camp growth mindset, camp, hero's journey, right? So there's gonna be
Mm-hmm.
people in the middle who's gonna get swayed, and um, you can't get away from that. So
Yeah.
so you guys who are IJs, I don't think it's just IJs, honestly. I think it's anyone
Yeah.
that has like a platform. They're gonna sway someone,
Yeah.
you know. Uh,
Right. Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And people take that so like seriously too. Like the well, one of the things I think it's like a benefit of being able to choose your consume is like you can pick people to consume that most align with either who you are, your values, or who you want to be, you know, the person you want to grow into. And so like being able to be very selective with, because yeah, like anyone who you consume is like, there's an element of brainwashing that's happening everywhere constantly. Like that's marketing, that's sales. It's like whether you're buying something or not, you're buying into an idea. And so, you know, you want to be very selective with what you consume. And of course, I'm preaching my savior saying, you know, be selective with consume. But like, I really do believe that it works in this context, because if you just open yourself up to all the consume, a lot of times you're going to be taking in maybe ideas and philosophies that like aren't very congruent with you or who you want to be or what you're trying to do with your life. And that can end up, you know, causing more challenges. But, you know, it's like, so like I'll hear people be like, oh, you know, people, I can't believe this person said this thing on like social media or this thing or that. And it's like, okay, fair. But also it's like, you get to select what you tune into. Like you get to select, like, you know, when I first saw Dave's videos, like back in the day, I was like, this person, whoever this person is, like David wasn't on the videos then. I'm like, their mindset very much aligns with the mind. And I like the way that they're looking at this whole psychology typology thing. And like, I'm on board with this direction, you know? And so it's like, I selected that consume, and like, yeah, he does like hit the growth mindset. He does like do those things, but like, I chose that because like, I wanted that in my life, you know? And so I think that's just kind of like, I think it's cool that we have the ability to select what we want to consume in order to kind of fine tune our direction. So
I think I had the same thought as you when I saw those old videos with the bubbles and stuff, like the
yeah,
and yeah, that's why I decided to consume his stuff too. I'm like, this guy's the only one that makes sense versus like the other people I'm watching,
yeah,
or just like the woo aspect of things. Um, so it's kind of interesting that you said you could select your consume, which I 100% agree with you. But I remember I was watching this one video with Owen Cook, you know, one of their heroes that they have in their group that they talk about in the classes. He's like the ENFP guy.
mm-hmm.
And his opinion is consume from everyone. Because you know, obviously he's lead consume, so he's preaching his
Oh God.
savior.
Yeah,
He's like, consume from everyone.
yeah,
You can be ignorant. You want to take opinion from opposing sides just so you can see the spectrum before you make a final decision. So it's kind of
mm-hmm.
interesting where you could go either way. And I know it's hard to say, but I did want to ask you, Lindsay, about your sleep animal and also your savior flex. So your demon sleep, but sleep is correlated with flex. So you're number 3, right? So you're supposed to have a savior flex, but then you have demon sleep. But then you're also FM, and you know, visuals are very much into aesthetics. So how are you in that flex stuff going on? Because it's there's a lot of moving parts there, you know, and a little bit of contradiction with the sleep and the flex.
yeah. So I think for myself, and like with the flex, it's like, so I'm totally adamant over the fact that I've been guilty of flexing very poorly because of like being kind of like the way my function stack is aligned and not really knowing how to flex properly. And so, you know, sometimes I'll look back at stuff that I've done over the past, I mean, even stuff on YouTube or like even like, and I'm like, I like talk about like trying, like I was trying to do the thing, like I was trying to flex. It was a fail, like it was not very good, you know, but it was like an attempt. And like you're saying, like the visual, like the aesthetic side, um, gosh, like even as a kid, I remember trying to um, like make stuff like happen or like put something like my mom's 40th birthday party when I was like 8 years old or something like that. And like I like painted my face green and like put on this big like fuzzy outfit, and like I went down and like got like drinks for people, like popped out, and my mom was horrified because I had a green face and like weird outfit on. But like, you know, somewhere in me, like I was trying to like, it was some kind of flex that I was trying to like, you know, take hold of. But it was just also like a real miss in terms of if anyone had like an SF, like if they're like, no one with SF in their right mind would have ever done a lot of
Right.
these things that I'm talking about, you know? And so you know, the sleep processing, like I don't know, I feel like for my flex, it feels like a little bit more like out of congruence with the how far my SF is, you know, versus like the sleep part of it. Um uh you know, because NF is very like, it's not very solid anyway.
Right.
It's very cerebral, and so it's hard for me to attach the flex like to that component. It's easier for me to look at it and like bounce it off the SF. But yeah, I guess does that kind of make sense?
Well, I mean, I was only mentioning it because David Chan said flex is correlated with sleep, right? And then the animals
Mm-hmm.
overtake the social type. So if you had demon sleep, but saviour flex, that means you want to flex, but demon sleep is telling you not to. And then on top of that, but then it's also weird because you know you still have social saviour flex, and you are a visual, and visual likes to have things look visually nice, but you're also DE,
Yeah,
and then you
yeah.
need permission from the tribe to do something. So it's like a lot of
Yeah, there is a lot
contradiction.
of like flip-flopping back and forth.
Exactly,
Yeah.
there's a lot of
It's not
contradiction.
very like, yeah, it's funny. It's like I'm glad that you're asking these questions about like the socials as it relates to these, because you know, some of these I hadn't really thought through as much for myself. But the you know, the I see why sleep is aligned with flex, because it's like in order to do the flex, there's almost like the self-realized like direction is like, it is very introverted. Like if you look at the introverted functions as being like identity tied, um it's like you have to be doubling down kind of on identity to like like to put friends far away, to put all these other things far away, right? And so, you know, the way that I've always seen myself as my NF self. You know, like if I had to be like, who is Lindsay out of all of these animals, at all these functions, it is my NIFI. Like that's how I've always seen myself my through my whole life. Now, that's how I see myself. I know that I'm doing NT to heck, like as a savior, right? But it's like I still see myself as the NIFI. And so I think also, you know, I remember one time I had written an email to Shan. This was a few years ago, and I was telling her about an experience I had like earlier in life where I was on SSRIs for depression, and like, but like it was, I really shouldn't have been. Like it was kind of an influence of my mom, who was friends with a psychiatrist and whatever, and she was like, why is my daughter so mopey? And like so, and I remember telling Shan that, like, you know, during that period, like when I was on these drugs, I felt very like high. Like I felt like I was like tripping all the time. Like I was just like on cloud nine, you know. I was like, wow, this is great. And I remember telling her that like after about 6 months, you know, I got to a place where I was like, well, this was great, but like I'm afraid of losing the person that I am and possibly getting swept away with whatever this is. And like I don't want to lose who I am, you know, because like that person's very important to me. And she was like, oh, that's interesting. Like you usually hear that from like the more like the DIs or like save your sleep more, you know?
Right.
Um and and we didn't really talk about it any further. We're just kind of like, huh. But you know, I think that's also a component, is like knowing who that person is, and like also wanting to like keep that as like someone who's in the forefront of my life. I think that kind of translates through the flex um too. So it makes sense, even though I have it third, I do have to go through the permission stuff, but it's also like very loud, I guess you could say, like in the background.
Yeah, it's I found it interesting that a lot of DEs with Savior Flex will still flex. Like they won't need the permission to flex. They'll just do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's definitely interesting for sure. Like for me, I have demon flex, so I need permission to use it. So it sounds like if it's not in a demon position, you can still do it. It's just like by default. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
And what would you consider like flexing? Like, can you give me, like, when you say like flex, like what do you think of, like in the real sensory reality?
Flex can come in many different aspects. So for females, you know, it could be like looking good, you know, dressing
Mhm.
nice, um, showing off. You know, if you have any talents specifically, you can show off too. Like could be singing, could be dancing, could be, I don't know, some kind of athletic ability. It could be
Okay, that makes
it could
sense.
be it
Yeah.
could be it could be smarts too. Like if you're really good at chess, You can do some kind of trick. So that's flex essentially. It could be it could
Okay.
be literally like flexing your muscle. So yeah, it comes in any aspect. The whole idea is you're drawing attention to yourself in some way. Like a lot of people who color their hair, that could be considered as flex, because that's like, especially if everyone has the same hair color, and then it's like, oh, who's this person with like you know, the rainbow hair color, right? So that they're flexing essentially. So it doesn't have to be aesthetically nice.
Yeah.
It just has to stand out. And the whole idea is getting attention. Like, look at me, I'm
Yeah.
special, I'm different, right? You know. Um,
It reminds me of when I was in elementary school and we were in the period of time where we had to like pick an instrument that we were going to play. And I remember like I was like convinced that like I convinced a friend of mine who was going to play saxophone. I convinced her to play the cello. I'm like, Courtney, we're going to play the cello together. It's going to be awesome. Like, we're going to be, it's let's do it. And she's like, okay, I guess I won't play saxophone. I guess I'll play cello instead. And then like the night where you're supposed to like sign off on the instrument you wanted, I'm like, actually, I'm gonna do the bass because it's bigger than the cello, and like I want to play the bigger one. And so like then I started playing. That's when I started playing bass, and she was playing cello, and then we played it all through like high school, and then I went off to play it in college as well. But it's so funny because I had thought of that just previously with the flex. I'm like, that was such a weird flex move as a kid to be like, yeah, actually, I convinced you to play this one, but I'm gonna go play the bigger one now.
right. It goes like what, violin, cello, and bass, right? Like that's kind of.
It's violin, viola, cello, and then bass. Yeah.
I see. So you went for the biggest one just to
Yeah.
flex. That's so funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's also a weird flex, as you said. All right, Lindsay. Yeah, it is. I'm like, of all the things you're gonna flex, it's that. No one's even gonna notice, you know? Like, but anyway, whatever. So before we wrap up this interview, Lindsay, do you have any last minute question for me that you want to bring up before we?
I I liked all the questions that I got to ask you so far. I guess like my last question would be, as someone who has savior friends, what is your best recommendation for working on friendships as someone who does not have a savior friends?
Oh, right, that's a good question. It's a little bit multi-layer from my opinion when it comes to friendship. So the first thing I would say is, if you and a friend are not in good terms, it doesn't mean you're not going to be in good terms later. Sometimes being not in good terms will lead to better terms, because I've had friends I had to cut out over the years. And some of them, when I cut them out, I felt absolutely horrible. I felt like I made the biggest mistake. And some of them that I did cut out, after cutting them out, I either felt nothing or I felt great. So sometimes you don't know where you stand with your friend until they're no longer there. So I think that's one way to examine it. But you don't get to that point unless there's a rift between the friendship, and then now the friendship has a chance to get tested. And unfortunately, friendship does need to get tested, especially if it's going to stand the test of time. Like, how strong is your bond, really, right? So I think that's the first aspect of it. And in terms of making new friends, it's really tough because Dave and Shan, the way they describe number twos is they tend to be more picky with friends, although when they do make friends, they're loyal to their friends. But they do have friends that are shitty because they got in their friendship box when they were young and they just never left.
Gotcha.
So I definitely have that also. And I have friends that, like, if I were to meet them as an adult, I would definitely not be friends with them. But the fact that I met them when we were kids,
now you're stuck.
I don't regret it at all. I'm actually glad they are my friend. And, being lead NT, I'm so glad I have friends that are idiotic, because I find it like the best, absolute best outlet for my double masculine SF sleep loss is when I see these guys, and because I knew them since I was a kid, I can literally say anything to them, and I say the most horrible things to them because I'm super aggressive inside with the double masculine SF. Like, I say the most horrible, offensive thing. I can't say it Like I would get canceled within seconds if I said it on camera. But because I know them since I was kids, I have this outlet where I can verbally abuse them as much as I want, and it's cool because they also do the same thing
It's
to
a
me.
safe area. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a safe area. So I do think it's good to have those long-term friendship, and even if your values don't align completely, I think as long as you enjoy their company, I think that's good enough a lot of times. So in my opinion, when it comes to friendship, you should definitely have a friend where you just enjoy their company. You don't really care about the values and stuff. It's just purely for the sake of company.
Oh, that's a good
And then,
point.
yeah, and then you should have friendship where it's intellectually stimulating, where you're constantly challenging each other to grow and stuff. The problem with that friendship is it tends to be a more serious friendship. It's not like a fun one. Um, so that's why it's good to have friendship from both camps, because I know some people, they only make friends from a utility standpoint where like this person is helping me grow, therefore it's a good friendship. And I completely think that
Yeah.
it's not a good mindset to have, because sometimes friendship just means you guys make each other feel nice. And so it's
Yeah.
yeah.
That's such a good balanced perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. And in terms of maintaining those friendship, like the older you get, the harder it is. But I think as long as you stay in touch at least once a year, that's good enough, where you see each other in person once a year. And also obviously you want to honor their love language and also communicate your love language to them. Like my love language is acts of service. So, and also quality time. And you're never gonna get someone to honor both your love language, but at least one of the two is good. So for me, it's like quality time, right? But if you like you're number three. I don't know if do you care about gifts? I don't know. It's like one of those weird ones. Yeah,
No, no, I never have.
yeah. It's one of those weird love language thing that David Chan is talking about. I don't think that one's sticking. Like, because I've interviewed a lot of people now.
Yeah.
It's the love language as a cross check for the social type is not sticking from what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
So I'll just leave it alone, I guess. But everyone still has love languages. So I think your love language needs to be honored, whatever it is. So if it's touch, then you need to go for the hugs, if it's or the handshake,
Mhm.
even if it's awkward and weird, you got to go for it. Yeah, quality time, got to book that once a year with that person, acts of service, help each other out, right? Words of affirmation, um, compliments and whatnot. So yeah, I think you just have to honor the love language at the end of the day. So, and you have to communicate it, because like a lot of people, especially the DEs, they don't communicate their love language. Then, and
That's true.
then you get resentful, and then you think that other
No,
person,
they don't know why.
yeah, you think the other person screwed you over, and you start blaming the other person, when in fact
Mhm.
you're the person that did not communicate your needs to the other person. So,
Yeah.
but after you communicate your needs and it's still not respected, then maybe your friendship is not as good as you thought it was. So, also reality check, right? So yeah, that's my
Yeah.
spiel on friendship.
That was a good one. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, so Lindsay, we'll wrap up the interview here. So thanks for coming out and sharing your journey since the last 4 years ago we originally spoke. Um, I've always been very fascinated with the number threes, because you guys are opposite of me. So I'm curious what you're doing, um, and like how I can take that in, because that's kind of like my growth path is three. So I definitely want to hear your perspective on that. So yeah, thanks again for sharing that.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
All right, take care. Bye bye.
Cool.